Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Gary here. I'm gonna be trying something new out today, and that is I'm gonna watch a video from somebody that I've been getting into recently. I like the content that I've been hearing. I've never watched this video before, so I guess you can call this a reaction video. I tell my students you can do training all over the place, right? I love watching videos with stuff that's gonna be I think interesting to listen to as well as to provide commentary. So that's what we're gonna try today. So here we go. I'm gonna bring this video in here, and we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get this started. Hope you guys enjoy the video.
I've talked to lots of business people about leadership, and there's a literature on leadership, but it's not a good literature. It's pretty shallow. Partly because it's not that easy to define leadership, and partly because there are different, people have different temperaments, and different temperaments can be leaders. They just do it in different ways. Now, there's something in common about being a leader, though, and I would say one is that if you're an actual leader, you actually know where you're going, right? Because what are you going to do? Lead people in circles? It's like maybe they'll follow you, but you're not a leader. You're just a charlatan. So you have to know where you're going, and then you have to be able to communicate that, and then people have to trust you, so you actually have to be honest because people aren't that stupid, at least not for a long period of time. And then where you're going has to have some value because otherwise, why would anyone want to go along with you?
he said, he said, he said, where are you gonna go? People gotta trust you. You can't be leading them in a circle. If you don't know where you're going, you're essentially a charlatan, which means you're essentially a liar. You're a fake. And then he talks about how they've got to try. And this is going to be a good video. This is Mr. Jordan B. Peterson, for those of you who don't know. So there's a good start. He come out swinging. I like it. Here we go.
And then you might say, well, what are the attributes then that make you a leader? And I would say, well, they're characterological, fundamentally. And this is not naive optimism or casual moralizing. It has nothing to do with that. We know, for example, that conscientiousness, the personality trait, is a good predictor of long-term success in most occupations, not all, but most. And that one of the things that's associated with conscientiousness is that people keep their word, they're trustworthy. And that's certainly one element of a leader, especially across any reasonable amount of time. You have to be able to trust the person. They can even be harsh, right? It doesn't matter, because you can see harsh.
Okay, so he says conscientiousness, which has to have to do with consciousness. And he talks about how it's trustworthy. Everyone, at least that I know, that's in a leadership position would tell you that they would agree, right? If you're going to be a leader, you've got to be somebody that they can trust. And I appreciate where he's saying somebody can be viewed as being a harsh or a kind leader, but as long as they're trustworthy, it's probably even more valuable. So here we go. That's his first quality for a leader, for a strong leader, is conscientiousness. Interesting.
Harsh leaders and kind leaders. But as long as they do what they say they will do, then you can follow them and you know that the future payoff is secure, something like that. So the idea that characterological development is more important to leadership than being a firstborn, that's a very crucial psychological realization, that it's characterological development that makes you favored of God. And I do think we've forgotten this in many ways, because there isn't a lot of emphasis in our education system on characterological development. And that's very, very surprising to me. I think maybe it's partly because in our fractured society, we can't agree on what constitutes a reasonable characterological goal. So we just throw up our hands and don't educate our kids to any degree at all, especially in schools, about what an admirable person is like, or even let them know that, well, maybe you should actually try to be one, that's actually the most important possible thing that you could learn, right?
I'm going to go ahead and pause that real quick. So characterological is the word he is using. And what that means to me is essentially a person with a logical character, or a type of a character, right? And a character that sounds like it's somebody that's going to be upstanding, it's going to be a strong citizen, that's going to be morally aligned with the principles of doing what they say and saying what they're going to do. And hey, I don't disagree with what he's saying. The only thing I would disagree with is that I do believe that we're doing our best in the education system, especially in programs like mine with the ROTC. We spend a lot of time on personal development. We spend a lot of time on citizen development and understand reinforcing the skills that are going to make somebody a positive contributor to society. But I can 100% relate with where he's coming from because not everybody is getting the same experience and not everyone is getting the same feedback at home or the same support within their their different experiences, right? I do give the teachers a lot of credit because they are doing their very best to help the majority of the kids that are in the programs while also being very, very, very overwhelmed. I mean, my school is very full, right? We have very full classes, and when you have one teacher to a large number of students, and you're typically getting distracted by some of the most challenging students. That being said, I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. It's not all that bad. The kids are actually not that bad, in my opinion. They just kind of get a bum deal. I'm not sure what year he made this video, and I know that it's easy to kind of always say these kinds of things about the upcoming generations because I've heard it my entire life. I don't know when I get to be old enough to finally say maybe these kinds of things about the future generations, but I just feel like if you're going to make these kinds of statements, then how would you ever be able to lead them? Because you're over here essentially dogging them out, saying that they're not getting what they need when what they need is something that we never had. Like when I was a kid, I didn't have to worry about social media and computers and all these other things. So it's a much different social society there. I'll give it that. But hey, ultimately, good stuff so far.
So, and I also think, and I think this is laid out very thoroughly in the biblical stories as well, is that if there are enough people who are admirable, then things work. And if there aren't, then things are terrible. You get wiped out. You remember when Abraham is bargaining with God with regards to Sodom and Gomorrah, he asks God to save the city if there's like 40 admirable people, right? Respectable. But let's say admirable, right? I don't want to say good because good is being corrupted in some sense by casual usage. I mean admirable, noble people, right? I think Abraham bargains God down to like 10. If there's 10 of them in the city won't be destroyed. And that's not very many in a city. So there's an interesting idea there, which is that there doesn't have to be that many people in a group who have their act together. But 0 is the wrong number. And if it's 0, then we're seriously in trouble. And I think that goes along with the idea of the Pareto principle in economics too, which is that it's a small minority of people who do most of the productive work in any given domain. So a small number of properly behaving people might have enough of an impact to keep everything moving, and that might actually be true, but it can't fall below some crucial level. And I do think that we're in some danger of allowing it to fall below some crucial level because our society seems to be at war in some ways against the idea of the individual and individual character per se. And I think that's absolutely catastrophic. That's part of the reason that I'm doing these biblical lectures. I think that I've known for a long time that the moral presuppositions of a culture are instantiated in its stories. They're not instantiated in its explicit philosophy. There might be a layer of explicit philosophy, and of course there is in the West, and a layer of explicit law, but underneath that there are stories. And there isn't anything under the stories except maybe behavior. That's so implicit, it doesn't even actually count. It's not a cognitive operation. And so these are the stories that are underneath our culture. So there better be something to them. That's what we hope. But more importantly, maybe we shouldn't toss them away without knowing what they mean, because...
Okay, so real quick, I just want to hit, I appreciate what he's saying, and I get the sense of the concern, but what I will tell you, especially in at least Ocala, Florida, where I live, is it's actually very awesome outside. Like life is really, really good. people are actually really decent. Now, don't get me wrong. Is there still bad people in the world? Yeah. Is there still people that can be mean? Sure. Are there still things that can be compromised? Yes. But to think that it's just uber morally corrupt out there, I would disagree. Now, I would say that there is significant corruption in the political class. Huge, huge, huge. The political class is just untrustworthy. We all know it. I would say that the military class, the warrior class, there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of been put through the ringer. There's a lot of angst, right? Which is where a lot of us are frustrated by the political class. We're frustrated by the people that seem like they're out of touch with the world. I get all that. But when I got back home from overseas, I spent a lot of my time in the military overseas. And when I got back from overseas, because I chose to be overseas because I liked that small town vibe. I liked the mission set. I liked being operational and what the United States Navy was doing. And there's really no better place to do it than the Pacific Theater, right? I really enjoyed the small community of the DoD, the DoDEA area, the Department of Defense community. But when I got back to the States, it's beautiful to be home. I also chose to come live in the great state of Florida, right? The free state of Florida. I chose to come somewhere where theoretically a lot of people had very similar ideals to me and to my family. But I will tell you that I love it. I love working in the public school system and working with these kids and seeing the future in their eyes. So when I hear the things that he's talking about, I feel for him because I get the concerns, but it's not that doom and gloom, at least not for me. And I feel bad for people that are living in that space because man, there's a lot of good things to be happy about out here. And I think that people forget about that when they get so wrapped around the axle on worry. You know, you gotta have faith, man. Faith over fear. Faith over fear is a big thing we have here in Florida. But bring us back in.
Throwing everything that we depend on away, as far as I can tell, and we will pay for it. We'll pay for it individually because we'll be weak. You know, because if you're not firm in your convictions, then someone else who's firm in their convictions, you're their puppet, like instantly. And then you're also the puppet of your own doubts, right? Because unless you have convictions, you're going to generate doubts like mad because everyone does. And then the doubts will win and you'll be paralyzed because there'll be, 50% of you moving forward and 50% of you frozen stiff. And that'll be enough just to lodge you in place.
So that was the video. I feel like that as a leader, I guess maybe he's trying to get across the point of he's got to get people to recognize that there is a possible, uh, presupposition to what's going on in the world, and that we've got to watch out for that. Um, I'm not going to get into politics. I'm not going to get into all the other news broadcast things that are out there. I will tell you that about my first 2.5, 3 years after the Navy, I purposefully didn't watch any news. I was just so disenfranchised by the whole thing. Now I watch it because it's pretty freaking entertaining how everyone's getting called on their crap. But you know what? Even though I wasn't watching the news, life was still awesome. Right? I was still enjoying my life. I was still enjoying going to the school, teaching these kids, and going to church on Sundays and be with my family and being a believer in God and having faith. So I appreciate the people that enter into those conversations and are willing to go fight for that. And I appreciate if they feel like there's something that to be really worried about. And brother, I'll let you worry about that. So I don't got to, because my faith is in my Lord, my Savior, Jesus Christ, is in my God. And I'm going to focus on my little community of doing the right thing, taking care of my people, and making sure and I do like the characterological thing. I do like the conscientiousness thing. And I think that's aligned with what we're already talking about every day in the classroom. So I think we're on the right track there. At the end of the day, it's good content. I'll post the the video link and all that if I post this up on my YouTube page just to get the word out there. I thought it was a good video. I'll definitely take something from it. Thank you, everybody, for if you watch this. This is my first time trying something along these lines. And I don't know if I'll do this anymore now, but we'll see. All right, y'all. Have a great day. Bye.